"Stop!" she snapped, her voice cutting through the hiss of mockery aimed at one man. In that instant, she was no longer just a maid. She was the only defense for a billionaire shattered by grief, the sole guardian of a promise the world had turned into a cruel joke. The air at Oakwood Cemetery was thick, suffocating under the weight of silent judgment. A sea of black-clad figures, the wealthiest and most powerful in the nation, had gathered to mourn the passing of Liam Vanderbilt, a young philanthropist gone too soon. Among them, nearly invisible, stood Maya. She watched her employer, the 32-year-old billionaire Adrian Sterling, stand frozen before the casket. Then the spectacle began. A figure cut through the mourning crowd, a wound of lurid neon green against the somber black. It was Adrian, wearing a suit that belonged in Las Vegas, not a sacred resting place. Whispers turned to gasps, then to open mockery. Phones were raised, their flashes a cruel, predatory swarm. They saw a madman, an insult to his best friend's memory. But Adrian was oblivious, a statue of grief, his eyes never leaving the smiling portrait of the man he'd lost. And from her corner, Maya felt no shock, only a profound, wrenching ache, because she was the only one there who knew the truth. The rain tapped a relentless rhythm against the tall windows of the Sterling mansion, each drop a fleeting plea against the cold marble facade. Inside, Maya Washington moved silently through the library, her clothes whispering over the polished wood of an antique bookshelf. Her dark eyes lingered on a worn copy of Gray's Anatomy, its spine cracked from use, a relic of dreams she'd tucked away like a pressed flower. She traced the title with a fingertip, her heart tightening at the thought of her mother, Catherine, who'd once read such books with fervor, her voice weaving tales of healing into Maya's childhood. The weight of unpaid bills and her family's needs pressed heavier than ever, anchoring her to this life of service. The mansion sprawled around her, its opulence a stark contrast to her simple navy uniform. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears, and the air carried a sterile chill, as if the house itself mourned in silence. It had been a week since Liam Vanderbilt's death, and the absence of his laughter left the halls hollow. Maya paused, cloth in hand, her gaze drifting to the rain-smeared windows. She could almost hear Liam's voice, warm and teasing, from the times he'd lingered in the kitchen, spinning stories of his and Adrian's boyhood adventures. "Adrian's tough as nails," he'd said once, grinning over a cup of coffee, "but inside, he's just a kid who needs someone to see him." In the adjacent study, Adrian Sterling sat hunched over his desk, the blue glow of his computer screen casting shadows across his sharp features. His gray shirt was rumpled, his dark hair disheveled, as if he'd raked his hands through it too many times. Papers lay scattered, untouched, his focus lost somewhere, beyond the numbers flickering before him. Maya hesitated at the doorway, clutching a tray with a steaming mug of chamomile tea. She'd chosen it deliberately, hoping its gentle warmth might ease the tension she sensed in him, though she doubted he'd notice. His grief was a wall, impenetrable, shutting out the world, including her. She stepped forward, her shoes silent on the Persian rug, and placed the mug on his desk, beside a stack of untouched reports. A small note rested beneath it, her neat handwriting reading, "Try this. It helps with sleep." Adrian's eyes flicked up, catching hers for a fleeting moment. Surprise softened his guarded expression, but he said nothing, only nodded curtly before returning to his screen. Maya's chest tightened, not with offense, but with recognition. She knew that look, the kind that hid a storm beneath a brittle surface. She'd worn it herself when she'd packed away her medical school applications, choosing her family's survival over her own dreams. Retreating to the library, Maya resumed her work, her movements mechanical but her mind alive with memories. She saw Liam's face, his easy smile lighting up the kitchen as he recounted tales of his and Adrian's hospital days, two boys defying their illnesses with laughter and wild promises. "He's not as cold as he seems," Liam had said, his voice softening. "He just needs someone to remind him he's not alone." Maya had nodded then, not fully understanding the weight of his words. Now standing in the silent library, she felt them settle like a vow. She moved to a window, watching the rain carve paths down the glass. The mansion's grandeur felt like a cage, its beauty a reminder of the life she'd put on hold. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "You've got a healer's heart, Maya. Don't let the world dim it." But the world had a way of pressing down, with bills piling up and her siblings depending on her. Yet Liam's warmth, his belief in her, lingered like a spark. He'd seen something in her, something she'd almost forgotten, her potential to save lives, to be more than this uniform. Maya's fingers brushed the edge of her apron, grounding herself. She thought of Adrian, alone in his study, his grief a mirror to her own quiet sacrifices. She didn't know him, not really, but she knew loss. She knew the ache of carrying love for someone who was gone. Liam's words rang clear. "Take care of him, Maya." She straightened, resolve hardening within her. She would honor that promise, not just for Liam, but for the part of herself that still dreamed of scrubs and stethoscopes. As she turned back to her work, the rain slowed to a drizzle, leaving the world outside blurred but softer. Maya glanced toward the study, where the faint glow of Adrian's screen still burned. She didn't expect him to drink the tea, but she hoped he'd seen the note, felt the gesture, however small. In this house of shadows, she would be a light, quiet, steady, unyielding, for Liam, for Adrian, and maybe for herself. The library clock chimed softly, marking the hour. Maya picked up her cloth, her heart steady despite the weight it carried. She would keep moving, keep watching, keep hoping. The rain might fall, but she would not. Maya sat alone in the mansion's kitchen, the faint scent of toasted bread lingering in the air. The soft glow of a hanging lamp bathed the room in warmth, a stark contrast to the sterile grandeur beyond its walls. Her phone rested on the counter, open to a medical scholarship application, its deadline looming like a distant star. Her fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating. The weight of her family's debts pressed against her chest, each unpaid bill a chain anchoring her dreams. She sighed, pushing the phone aside, and let her gaze drift to the worn linoleum floor, where memories of Liam Vanderbilt flickered like candlelight. She could still see him, perched on a stool here weeks ago, his tired frame belying the mischief in his eyes. "You've got the heart of a doctor, Maya," he'd said, his voice warm but fraying at the edges. "Don't let the world steal that from you. You'll save lives one day like your mom did." His words had caught her off guard, piercing the armor she'd built around her ambitions. He'd spoken of his and Adrian's childhood promise then, a pact forged in a hospital room, to wear neon green, a defiant splash of life against the sterile white of illness and the black of loss. "We were sick of funerals," he'd chuckled, "so we chose hope instead." Maya's lips curved at the memory, but her heart ached. Liam had seen her, truly seen her, in a way few others had. His final request echoed now, heavy with purpose. "Adrian will need someone to understand him when I'm gone. You're the only one I trust, Maya, and don't be shocked if he shows up to my funeral looking like a lime." She'd laugh then, promising to watch over Adrian, not fully grasping the weight of that vow. Now with his absence a fresh wound, she felt its gravity. The kitchen door creaked, pulling her from her thoughts. She straightened, smoothing her apron, and grabbed a tray to prepare tea for Adrian. Her steps were deliberate as she moved toward his study, the tray a quiet offering. She knocked softly, entering to find him still at his desk, the computer's glow casting harsh shadows across his face. "Mr. Sterling," she ventured, her voice steady but gentle, "would you like more tea? This one's lavender. It helps with rest." Adrian's eyes flicked up, his expression a fortress of indifference. "No need," he said curtly, "but thank you." His tone was ice, but Maya caught the faint tremor in it, the grief he couldn't voice. She set the tray down anyway, her fingers brushing the note she'd tucked beneath the cup. "For calm nights." She stepped back, undeterred by his coldness. Liam's words rang in her mind. He's just a kid inside, scared and alone. She saw it now, the way Adrian's shoulders hunched, as if shielding a wound. She nodded silently and left, her resolve hardening. She would keep her promise, even if he pushed her away. Later, in the quiet of the laundry room, Maya folded linens, her hands moving with practiced ease. She paused when she found a polished wooden box in Adrian's wardrobe, tucked beside a pressed black suit. Curiosity tugged at her. and she opened it to reveal a neon green suit, its vibrant hue startling in the dim light. Her breath caught. This was it, the promise Liam had spoken of, bold and unapologetic. She touched the fabric, her fingers trembling as she imagined Adrian wearing it, not for show, but for love. A smile broke across her face, soft and wistful. Liam had been right. She wouldn't be surprised. Back in her small room at the mansion, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, the scholarship application glowing on her phone. Liam's voice echoed, "You'll save lives, Maya. Don't give up." She thought of her mother, Catherine, who'd worked nights to care for patients, her stories of hope fueling Maya's dreams. The weight of her sacrifices, her siblings' school fees, her mother's medical bills, pressed down, but Liam's faith in her was a lifeline. She opened a notebook, jotting down the scholarship's requirements, her handwriting firm. "I can do this," she whispered, the words a vow to herself, to Liam, to the girl who still dreamed of scrubs and stethoscopes. The mansion was silent now, the rain long gone. Maya glanced at the clock. Midnight. She thought of Adrian, alone in his study, and the neon suit waiting for its moment. She didn't know what the funeral would bring, but she knew she'd be there, watching, ready to honor Liam's trust. Her fingers brushed the notebook, where she'd written, "For Liam, for Mom, for me." She closed it, her heart steady. The promise wasn't just Adrian's, it was hers too. Maya stood at the edge of the Oakwood Cemetery, her navy coat blending into the sea of black-clad mourners. The autumn air bit at her skin, carrying the scent of damp earth and fading leaves. The sky hung heavy, gray clouds pressing down on the crowd gathered around Liam Vanderbilt's polished mahogany coffin. Whispers of condolence floated like ghosts, hollow and rehearsed, while Maya's gaze fixed on the single bong hoa huang duong in her hand, its vibrant yellow a quiet rebellion against the somber scene. She clutched it tightly, her heart heavy with the memory of Liam's laughter, his voice urging her to chase her dreams. Adrian Sterling emerged from the crowd, and a hush fell. His neon green suit blazed against the monochrome mourners, a beacon of defiance and devotion. Maya's breath caught, not from surprise but from the weight of what it meant. She saw no bravado in his stance, only a raw, unspoken grief etched into the lines of his face. His eyes, usually sharp and guarded, were soft with pain as he stood before the coffin, hands clasped, the sunflower he held trembling slightly. This was no performance. It was a promise kept, a silent vow to a friend who'd painted his world with color. Maya's gaze shifted to Liam's family, standing closest to the coffin. Eleanor, Liam's mother, gripped a handkerchief, her face pale and drawn. Sarah, his younger sister, stood beside her, eyes red-rimmed, but steady. At first, their expressions faltered at Adrian's appearance, a flicker of hurt crossing Eleanor's features, as if the bright suit mocked their loss. But as Adrian bowed his head, his shoulders sagging under an invisible weight, Eleanor's eyes softened. She exchanged a glance with Sarah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Eleanor stepped forward, her hand resting briefly on Adrian's shoulder, a wordless gesture of understanding. Sarah's lips curved faintly, a glimmer of gratitude in her eyes. They saw it now, the love behind the color. Maya's chest tightened, her own grief mingling with admiration. She saw Adrian not as the untouchable billionaire, but as a man carrying a wound only Liam had ever soothed. Her mind flashed to her own sacrifices, the medical school applications buried in a drawer, the nights spent worrying over bills. Like Adrian, she knew what it meant to honor someone through a choice others might not understand. Liam's words echoed, "You'll save lives, Maya. Don't give up." She felt a kinship with Adrian in that moment, two souls bound by loyalty to the same man. The crowd stirred, their murmurs growing sharper as cameras clicked, capturing Adrian's vivid suit. Maya ignored them, her focus unwavering. She stepped forward, her movements quiet but deliberate, and approached the lung hoa near the coffin. She placed her sunflower among the white roses, its golden petals a quiet echo of Adrian's promise. She whispered, barely audible, "Liam would be proud of you." Her words were for Adrian, though she doubted he heard. It didn't matter. She felt the truth of them in her bones. Maya retreated to her place at the crowd's edge, her hands clasped tightly. The weight of Liam's trust pressed against her, a reminder of her promise to care for Adrian. She thought of the scholarship application waiting on her phone, the dream she'd almost let slip away. Liam had believed in her, just as he'd believed in Adrian. She wouldn't let him down. Not in this, not in anything. The priest's voice droned on, but Maya barely heard it. Her eyes lingered on Adrian, standing alone despite the crowd. His neon suit a silent scream of love and loss. She saw Eleanor and Sarah watching him, their faces softened now, their initial shock replaced by a quiet acceptance. The sunflower in the lung hoa caught the faint light, a beacon of hope amidst the gray. Maya's fingers brushed the silver bracelet in her pocket, a keepsake from her mother, a talisman of her own resolve. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew she'd be there. For Adrian, for Liam, for the girl who still dreamed of healing. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya lingered, her gaze fixed on the coffin. The wind carried a chill, but she felt a warmth within, kindled by Liam's memory and her own determination. She would carry his light forward, just as Adrian carried his promise. The neon green suit wasn't just a color, it was a declaration, and Maya understood it better than anyone. Maya stood at the edge of the Oakwood Cemetery, her breath catching as the crowd's murmurs grew sharper, like the buzz of wasps. The gray sky pressed lower, amplifying the weight of the moment. Adrian Sterling remained by Liam's coffin, his neon green suit a defiant flame against the sea of black, his face etched with a grief too raw for words. Maya's fingers tightened around the silver bracelet in her pocket, her mother's keepsake, grounding her as she felt the air shift. The cameras flashed, relentless, and a knot of reporters closed in on Adrian, their voices slicing through the solemnity. "Why the green, Mr. Sterling? Is this a stunt?" one called, his tone laced with mockery. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the coffin as if it held the last tether to his friend. Maya's heart clenched. She saw the vulnerability he hid so well, the boy Liam had described, scared and alone beneath the billionaire's armor. She remembered Liam's plea, "Take care of him, Maya." Her pulse quickened, urging her forward despite the tremble in her limbs. She stepped out from the crowd, her navy coat unremarkable but her posture resolute. The reporters turned, sensing a new target. Maya's voice, steady despite her racing heart, cut through the noise. "A friend chose color to honor life, not to let death swallow everything. That's a promise you wouldn't understand." Her words hung in the air, sharp and clear, silencing the crowd for a breath. She wasn't speaking to them. She was speaking for Adrian, for Liam, for the vow she'd made. A wiry reporter with a smirk stepped closer, his camera glinting. "And who are you to speak for a billionaire? Just the help, right?" His words stung, slicing into the tender place where Maya buried her doubts. She felt the weight of her uniform, the years of sacrifice, the dreams deferred. But she thought of Liam's voice. "You have a doctor's heart," and her spine straightened. "I'm someone who keeps a promise," she said, her tone calm but edged with steel. "Loyalty doesn't need a title, and I believe Liam would want this." The reporter faltered, his smirk fading as the crowd fell silent. Maya's gaze flicked to Adrian. His eyes met hers, no longer cold but wide with something raw. Gratitude, perhaps, or recognition. For the first time, she felt seen by him, not as a shadow in his mansion, but as a person. Her chest ached with the intensity of it, but she held his gaze, steady as a lighthouse in a storm. Sarah, Liam's sister, stood nearby, her red-rimmed eyes softening. As the reporters retreated, she approached Maya, her steps hesitant. Without a word, she pressed a small silver bracelet into Maya's hand, Liam's, worn thin from years of wear. "He'd be so proud of you," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Maya's throat tightened, her fingers closing around the bracelet. The gesture felt like a bridge, connecting her to Liam, to his family, to the promise she carried. The crowd began to thin, the priest's final words fading into the wind. Maya lingered, her heart a tangle of resolve and uncertainty. Had she overstepped? The reporter's words echoed, "Just the help," and she wondered if the world would ever see her as more. But the weight of the bracelet in her hand, cool and solid, anchored her. She thought of Liam's encouragement. You'll save lives, Maya. She thought of her mother, Catherine, who'd taught her that courage was quiet but unyielding. She'd spoken for Adrian, for Liam, and in doing so, for herself. As the mourners dispersed, Maya glanced at Adrian. He stood alone now, his sunflower still clutched tightly, the neon suit a silent testament to his love for Liam. She wanted to say more, to bridge the gap between them, but the moment wasn't right. She tucked the bracelet into her pocket, its presence a reminder of her strength. The reporter's cameras still lingered, their lenses hungry for more, and Maya knew the fallout was coming. Her name would be in their stories, twisted into something she wasn't, a maid who dared to speak, but she wouldn't falter. She turned to leave, her steps steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, and Maya felt a spark within her, kindled by Liam's faith in her own resolve. She'd kept her promise today, but it was only the beginning. For Liam, for Adrian, for the doctor she still dreamed of becoming, she would keep going. The Rolls-Royce hummed softly, its leather interior a cocoon of quiet as it glided through the rain-slicked streets away from Oakwood Cemetery. Maya sat in the back, her fingers tracing the smooth edges of the silver bracelet Sarah had given her, its weight a tether to Liam's memory. The city blurred past the tinted windows, a smear of gray and neon lights. But her mind was still at the graveside, replaying the moment she'd spoken for Adrian. Her heart pounded with a mix of pride and dread. Pride for honoring Liam's trust, dread for the whispers she knew would follow. The reporter's sneer, just the help, clung to her, a barb she couldn't shake. Adrian sat across from her, his neon green suit now dulled by the dim light, his face turned toward the window. His silence was a wall, but Maya sensed a crack in it, a shift in the way his shoulders no longer seemed so rigid. She wanted to speak, to bridge the distance, but the air felt too fragile, like a thread stretched taut. The bracelet warmed in her hand, and she thought of Liam's voice. You have a doctor's heart, Maya. Don't give up. She held on to that, a lifeline against the uncertainty swelling within her. Back at the Sterling mansion, the grand foyer echoed with their footsteps as they entered. The rain had stopped, leaving a damp chill that seeped through the marble floors. Maya moved to the kitchen, her hands steady as she prepared a tray of lavender tea. Its floral scent a quiet rebellion against the house's coldness. She carried it to the living room, where Adrian sat on a leather armchair, staring at the unlit fireplace. She set the tray down, the clink of porcelain breaking the silence. Mr. Sterling, she said softly, you haven't eaten all day. This might help. He looked up, his eyes catching hers, no longer the icy shield she'd grown used to. You spoke for me today, he said, his voice rough, like gravel worn smooth by time. How did you know what to say? The question hung between them, unguarded, and Maya felt the weight of it. She sat across from him, folding her hands to steady herself. Liam told me about your promise, she said. He said you'd need someone to understand you after he was gone. He trusted me to be that person. She paused, her throat tightening. And he believed in me, too. He said I had a doctor's heart, that I should keep chasing my dream to save lives. Adrian's gaze softened, a flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, crossing his face. Maya pressed on, her voice low but steady. My mom was a nurse. She taught me that caring for someone means seeing their pain, even when they hide it. I know what it's like to lose a piece of yourself, Mr. Sterling. I gave up medical school to keep my family afloat. Her fingers brushed the bracelet, grounding her. But Liam reminded me not to let go of that dream. For the first time, Adrian leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. Liam was the only one who saw me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We were kids in that hospital, playing superheroes to forget the needles and the fear. He made me promise we'd never let death win. His eyes drifted to the window, where the city lights flickered. That green suit, it was for him, not for them. Maya nodded, her chest aching with the echo of his loss. She saw her own reflection in his words, the dreams she'd buried, the promises she'd made to herself. Liam knew you'd keep that promise, she said, and he knew you'd need someone to remind you you're not alone. Her words felt like a vow, binding her to Liam's trust, to Adrian's grief, to her own resilience. The silence that followed was softer, less heavy. Maya thought of the articles already circulating, the headlines that would twist her words into scandal. Maid speaks for billionaire, or worse, mocking her for daring to step out of her place. The reporter's voice echoed, "Just the help," and she felt a pang of doubt. Had she been reckless? But the bracelet in her pocket, Liam's words, her mother's lessons, they anchored her. She'd spoken from her heart, and that was enough. Adrian sipped the tea, surprising her, and set the cup down gently. "Thank you, Maya," he said, her name sounding new in his voice, like a door creaking open. She met his gaze, seeing not the billionaire, but the boy from Liam's stories, vulnerable and searching. She stood, offering a small smile. "Good night, Mr. Sterling." In her room, Maya opened her phone, the screen glowing with a harsh headline. "Who is the maid who stood up for Sterling?" She scrolled, her stomach twisting at the mix of praise and scorn, but she closed the app, her fingers finding the bracelet. "I did it for you, Liam," she whispered, "and for me." She wouldn't let the world dim her light. Not yet. The flicker of the fireplace cast a warm glow across the Sterling mansion's living room, softening the sharp edges of the mahogany furniture. Maya sat on the edge of a velvet sofa, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, its steam curling like a quiet promise. Across from her, Adrian leaned back in his armchair, the faint crackle of the fire filling the silence between them. The neon green suit was gone, replaced by a simple sweater, but the weight of Liam's absence lingered in his eyes. Maya felt it too, a shared ache that made the air feel fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. Her fingers brushed the silver bracelet from Sarah, its cool metal grounding her as she sensed the moment was right to dig deeper. "Tell me about the hospital," she said softly, her voice steady but inviting. "You and Liam, what was it like back then?" Adrian's gaze drifted to the fire, his fingers tightening around his own mug. For a moment she thought he'd retreat behind his walls, but then he spoke, his voice low, almost reverent. "Room 207, he began. "That's where it started. We were just kids, stuck in beds with IVs, surrounded by white walls and beeping machines. Liam, he made it bearable. We'd draw superheroes on napkins, sneak extra pudding, make up stories about saving the world." A faint smile touched his lips, fleeting as a shadow. He was the brave one, always laughing, even when it hurt. Maya's heart stirred, picturing the two boys, their defiance a spark against the sterile gloom. She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Sounds like he was your light." Adrian nodded, his eyes distant. "There was this nurse," he continued. "She'd bring us candy, those little red ones, wrapped in crinkly plastic. She'd tell us jokes, call us her superheroes. She made that room feel like home." His voice caught, and he looked down, as if the memory was too heavy to hold. Maya's breath hitched. The bracelet felt heavier in her pocket, and a realization dawned, sharp and electric. "Was her name Catherine?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. Adrian's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "How did you—" She swallowed, her heart racing. "My mom was a pediatric nurse. She worked at that hospital in the children's ward. She used to tell me about two boys in room 207, how they taught her what hope really meant. She'd come home with stories about their courage, their laughter. It's why I wanted to be a doctor." She paused, her voice softening. "Liam said I'd save lives one day, like she did." Adrian stared at her, his expression unraveling. Shock, wonder, something like awe. "Room 207, that was our room," he whispered. "Catherine was your mother?" Maya nodded, her eyes stinging. "She loved you both. She said you and Liam were her favorite patients, the ones who kept her going." She reached into her pocket, pulling out the bracelet, its silver catching the firelight. "Liam believed in me because of her. He told me not to give up, to keep chasing that dream." The room seemed to shrink, the world narrowing to the two of them, bound by a thread of fate. Adrian set his mug down, his hands shaking slightly. "Catherine used to sneak us extra candy," he said, his voice thick. "She'd sit with us when the nights got bad, Tell us we were stronger than we thought. I never forgot her. He looked at Maya, his eyes searching hers. You're like her, you know. The way you see people. The way you care. Maya's throat tightened, her mother's memory a warm ache in her chest. She thought of Catherine's stories, the way she described those boys with such pride. Mom said you and Liam gave her hope, she said. That's what pushed me to want to heal people, to make a difference like she did. Even when I had to put it all on hold, I couldn't let go of that. Her fingers closed around the bracelet, Liam's words echoing. You'll save lives, Maya. Adrian leaned forward, his voice barely audible. Liam always said we'd find light in the dark. I didn't believe him until now. The words landed like a gift, and Maya felt a shift, a bridge forming between them. She wasn't just the help anymore. She was someone who understood, who carried the same memories, the same promises. The fire crackled, its warmth wrapping around them. Maya stood, her heart full but steady. You're not alone, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice soft but firm. Liam made sure of that. She moved toward the door, pausing to glance back. Adrian was watching her, his eyes no longer guarded but open, vulnerable. She smiled faintly, the bracelet a quiet weight in her hand. As she stepped into the hallway, Maya felt the world shift beneath her. Room 207 wasn't just a memory, it was a legacy, tying her to Liam, to Adrian, to her mother. She would carry it forward, for all of them. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window of the Sterling mansion, casting soft patterns across the counter where Maya stood, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. The warmth of the drink did little to ease the chill in her chest. Her phone lay open beside her, its screen glaring with a headline that stung like a slap. Maid's bold speech at Vanderbilt funeral sparks debate. The article was a patchwork of praise and scorn, some calling her a voice of courage, others sneering that she'd overstepped her place. Maya's fingers tightened around the mug, her heart heavy with the weight of being seen, not as a person, but as a spectacle. She thought of the silver bracelet in her pocket, Liam's gift from Sarah, and her mother's words. A healer's heart doesn't bend to the world's noise. But the noise was loud. At the mansion, Emma, a fellow housekeeper, had cornered her in the break room earlier, her voice sharp with disdain. What's next, Maya? You think you're a hero now? You're just the help, like me. The words had cut deeper than Maya expected, stirring a flicker of doubt. Had she been reckless at the funeral, speaking out for Adrian? She pushed the thought away, but it lingered, a shadow on her resolve. Later, as she sorted mail in the foyer, a plain envelope caught her eye. No return address, just her name scrawled in harsh ink. She opened it, her breath catching at the words inside. Stay in your lane, maid. Don't meddle with the rich. The anonymity of the note made it heavier, a faceless judgment that echoed Emma's taunts. Maya's hands trembled as she tucked the letter away, her mind spiraling. She'd only wanted to honor Liam, to protect Adrian's heart, but now the world was watching, and it didn't see her as she saw herself. She retreated to her small room in the servants' quarters, pulling out her mother's old medical textbook. Its pages were dog-eared, marked with Catherine's notes in the margins, reminders of a life spent healing. Maya traced the words, her thoughts drifting to Liam's encouragement. You have a doctor's heart, Maya. You'll save lives. She opened her notebook, where she'd listed scholarship deadlines, and felt a spark reignite. The letter, Emma's words, the headlines, they were noise, not truth. She wrote in her journal, her pen steady, Liam believed in me. Mom believed in me. I have to believe in myself. That evening, Maya joined Adrian for dinner in the dining room, a new ritual that felt less formal, more human. The long mahogany table was set simply, just soup and bread, but the air was softer, warmed by their growing ease. Adrian broke the silence, his voice quieter than usual. I saw the articles, Maya. They're talking about you. She tensed, bracing for judgment, but his eyes held only concern. You didn't have to do that. Speak for me. Why did you? Maya set her spoon down, her gaze steady. Liam asked me to look out for you, but it wasn't just that. I know what it's like to carry a promise, to hold on to something bigger than yourself. She paused, her voice softening. I gave up medical school for my family, but Liam told me to keep going, to be a doctor. I spoke at the funeral because I wanted to honor him and to remind myself I'm still fighting for that dream. Adrian leaned back, his expression unreadable but softer, like a wall beginning to crumble. You're stronger than I am, he said almost to himself. Liam always saw that in people, their strength. Maya smiled faintly, her fingers brushing the bracelet in her pocket. He saw it in you too, she said. That's why he made you promise the green suit. After dinner, Maya sat at her desk, her laptop open to a scholarship application. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, the weight of the day, Emma's scorn, the anonymous letter, still pressing against her. But she thought of room 207, of her mother's stories, of Liam's faith. She began typing, her words flowing with quiet determination. When she hit submit, her heart raced, not with fear but with hope. Unbeknownst to her, Adrian sat in his study, a phone call already made to a dean at a prestigious medical school. He hadn't told Maya not yet, but he'd requested information on scholarships, driven by a quiet resolve to repay the kindness she'd shown him. He thought of Liam, of Catherine, of the girl who'd stood up for him in a sea of judgment. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of purpose. Maya closed her laptop, the bracelet glinting in the lamplight. The world could whisper its doubts, but she would keep moving forward. For Liam, for her mother, for herself. The morning sun spilled golden light across Oakwood Cemetery, softening the sharp edges of the tombstones. Maya stood beside Adrian at Liam's grave, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of fallen leaves and fresh earth. In her hands she held a bouquet of sunflowers, their vibrant petals a vivid echo of the hope Liam had always embodied. She wore a simple green blouse, its hue a quiet nod to the neon promise that had bound them all. Her fingers brushed the silver bracelet from Sarah, its weight a steady reminder of her purpose. The world felt quieter here, as if the earth itself paused to honor the man who'd filled it with laughter. Adrian stood beside her, his posture less rigid than it had been a month ago, though grief still lingered in the lines of his face. He held a small plastic superhero figure, its green paint chipped from years of play, a relic from room 207. Maya glanced at him, seeing not the billionaire but the boy from Liam's stories, the one who'd clung to friendship as a lifeline. The cemetery was nearly empty, save for a few distant mourners, and the silence felt sacred, a canvas for their shared memories. Maya stepped forward first, kneeling to place the sunflowers against the headstone. Their golden heads glowed against the gray stone, a burst of life amidst the somber rows. You were right, Liam, she whispered, her voice soft but steady. You said we'd find light in the dark. She thought of his encouragement, his belief that she could be a doctor, and the way he'd entrusted her with Adrian's care. The bracelet warmed against her wrist, a silent affirmation of her path. Adrian knelt beside her, placing the superhero figure gently on the grave. This was yours, Liam, he said, his voice low, almost breaking. You always said we were superheroes, even when we were scared. He paused, his eyes tracing the etched name on the stone. Thank you for her. His glance flicked to Maya, brief but weighted with gratitude. She met his gaze, her heart swelling with the recognition of their shared loss, their shared strength. They stood, the breeze stirring their clothes, and Maya felt a need to speak, to anchor the moment. I sent in my scholarship application, she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Liam told me I'd save lives one day, like my mom did. You helped me believe I could try again, Mr. Sterling. She smiled faintly, the memory of room 207 vivid in her mind, her mother's stories, Liam's faith, the boys who'd taught her what hope meant. Adrian turned to her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen. It's Adrian, he corrected gently, the first time he'd invited such familiarity. And I have something to tell you. He took a breath, his hands clasped tightly. I spoke to a dean at Johns Hopkins. They're offering you a full scholarship, not because of me, but because of your potential. I just, made the call. His voice faltered, then steadied. It's for Liam, for your mother, for everything you've done. Maya's breath caught, her eyes stinging as the weight of his words settled. A scholarship, Johns Hopkins. The dream she'd buried under bills and duty was suddenly within reach. Tears spilled over, but she laughed through them, a sound of joy and disbelief. "You did that for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adrian nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "For you and for them. Catherine saved us back then. Liam believed in you. I'm just keeping the promise going." She wiped her eyes, the sunflowers blurring through her tears. The bracelet gleamed, a link to Liam, to her mother, to the boy Adrian had been. "Thank you, Adrian," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll make them proud." The words were a vow, not just to him, but to herself, to the girl who'd once dreamed of healing the world. They stood in silence, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows across the grave. The superhero figure stood sentinel, its green paint catching the light, a symbol of the promise they'd both kept. Maya felt a shift within her, a certainty that this was not an end, but a beginning. She and Adrian were no longer just employer and employee. They were friends, bound by loss, by love, by a shared past in room 207. As they turned to leave, Maya glanced back at the grave, the sunflowers radiant against the stone. "We'll carry you with us, Liam," she whispered. She walked beside Adrian, their steps in sync, the weight of the bracelet a quiet reminder of her strength. The path ahead would be hard, medical school, the world's judgments, but she was ready, for Liam, for Catherine, for herself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya and Adrian walked away from Liam's grave, the sunflowers glowing like embers of hope. The neon green promise had bound them, through grief, through courage, through a shared past in room 207. Maya's heart carried Liam's faith, her mother's legacy, and her own unyielding dream. With the scholarship secured, she saw a future where she'd heal lives, just as Liam believed she would. Beside her, Adrian's steps were lighter, his walls softened by their bond. Together, they carried Liam's light forward, a vibrant promise unbroken by time.